You're tuned in to the MtG Cable cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seatbelts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cable cast. Starring Reptar and Thirsty, them onion head motherfuckers.
I have hit record, so bring us in whenever you want.
Cool. Alrighty, everyone. Welcome to the newest episode of the Cabalcast, and this week we're doing kind of a recap. So obviously we have our pick system we use, and this week we are looking back at Wilds of Eldraine and giving it the Goldilocks treatment with the gift of hindsight, which is always 20/20. Yep. So let's take it away.
Right, so as you stated before the cast, we're going to do this in kind of a Goldilocks approach. So start off with underhyped, then overhyped, and then kind of just right. So for me to start out, my underhyped card was Moonshaker Cavalry. It seemed like people weren't really talking about it, and that's kind of where we are still. Stocks graph basically shows this. It's very slowly trending downward. People are just not interested in seemingly giving their tokens flying instead of trample right now, and it's understandable. When we compare it to Craterhoof, which is basically just the one-to-one comparison, Craterhoof is in 100,000 decks on rec compared to Moonshaker, which is only in 11,000, 12 if you're generous and round up. So it's not like people haven't really gotten the time to kind of play with this card. They just don't seem to be playing it in the way I expected it to just yet. They're playing it in like weird Enchantress builds and some other odds and ends like that. It doesn't really seem like they're moving in or whole ass into tokens yet. So there is still the opportunity in the long run for this card to pick up in the way that we thought it would. But I did not expect it to rope for as long as it had. And it still remains kind of this maybe middling card out of woe. And not just from a financial standpoint, but just from an interest standpoint overall.
Yeah, this is one that I think, with the benefit of time, because obviously Craterhoof's been out for a while, comparatively. I fully expect it to still grow there. I mean, that effect is just popular everywhere. It doesn't matter. Yeah. It just is.
I think that there's a lot of opportunity for this card to grow. I keep thinking about it ever since like this episode kind of came up, and I realized how much work I did not have to do to prep. And I was like, why like, if you're going to play Selesnya, you're going to run Craterhoof first. Sure, that makes sense. It gives pluses and tramples, and Moonshaker gives pluses and flying. Yeah. And then you think about it a little more, and you're like, what is the harder keyword to give Selesnya creatures? And the answer is flying. It's not trample. With Craterhoof Behemoth, like, you can get that trample. Like, the trample is redundant with a number of other options you might already be playing in the Incarnation Brawn, in Nylea, God of the Hunt, and
Primal Vigor, I think, is the 2-mana enchantment that just does it. I mean, exactly. There's a lot that does it there.
Right? That's super redundant. But if you wanted to give all your creatures flying, that is not really attached to green or white. That's more of a blue thing. And then you're looking at the blue Incarnation Wonder and archetype of Courage. The blue archetype that strips your... It's a cycle from the original Theros block where your creatures gain a keyword and it strips your opponent's creatures of that keyword. It's like flying, first strike, hexproof, some 2 other keywords that don't matter, right? And so it's much harder to get white in Selesnya tokens, and I don't know if people have realized that in concert, these cards are really good, and if you had to pick one over the other, just based on the keywords that are given, maybe Moonshaker is the better option overall. And so I think, like you said, this is just going to take some time for people to really kind of like plug it in and figure it out.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the important things to look at, especially now with us being in the era of Magic we're in. There is a lot less opportunity to quick flip, but there is a lot more opportunity for, okay, let me actually ride this out and see what happens.
Yeah.
So it is just a more long-term game now, and that's fine. That's just the reality of it. You just need to accept it, you know.
Yep.
Say la vie.
Exactly. For you, your underhyped pick was a little interesting because you went off the beaten path here and picked a common.
I did. Now, I did when I said, I don't think there is such a thing as underhyped anymore, because cards are so mass produced, cards are so widely opened, everything that like the value just isn't there. So I went for a foil common that to me actually has a somewhat viable place in Pauper.
Yeah.
And in EDH, in Enchantress, because it does provide something that the archetype doesn't have, which is, card selection. That just doesn't exist for the archetype. And, that's fine. But I think, I had to pick one, but it's now 9 cents. The set
we haven't said what it is yet, so it's Slumbering Keep Guard.
Slumbering Keeper. Yeah, my apologies. It is Slumbering Keeper. Look, man, there's got to be something in one of these sets that's going to be underhyped. Okay, I know I said it doesn't exist, and I still firmly believe it doesn't, but I'm probably wrong, and I'm willing to admit that. You just have to be infinitely more selective now than we have ever been in the past with trying to find stuff like this, because I know I went on a rant at the end of the episode about Agatha's Soul Cauldron or whatever, but that's besides the point. This card I thought would have opportunity. I thought there would be fewer foil commons because it's just naturally what's happened as the game has evolved. Stores have opened collector boosters, and we literally, Star City basically just publicly said, hey, we only open collector boosters now. We will open set for, once it's out, we're not opening nearly as much, and we really just don't care as much. And that's kind of been the story everywhere. So I was wrong. This was not underhyped. In my defense, I said nothing could be underhyped ever again. So that's all I got.
Yeah, when you look at this card, it doesn't suffer from the same valuation of Moonshaker Cavalry. It's in this odd spot where there's a pedigree for cards that are similar to this when you look at the heroic keyword.
Oh,
and
yeah.
we had those heroic decks in Standard. They got ported to Pioneer for a hot minute, and they did okay. Yeah. And that's kind of what this offers, is you target this with an aura, and you scry. It's just a different version of heroic. It's more of a Bogle style, but that doesn't really exist. And when we did see the Bogle deck in Pioneer, it was well before Woe existed, and the format looked wildly different. Like Light Paws was the new hotness that brought that deck kind of to prominence in the format for, I think, like a Pro Tour or something. So it's not like this pick was just out of left field. There is a pedigree for this type of effect. We just didn't get all the pieces necessary to make it good in Standard, to make it stand up in Pioneer, and then like whatever is going on in Pauper is going on in Pauper. And so that's just what it is. For me, going on now to overhyped, I picked Beseech the Mirror, and I said this seems like Goblin Dark Dweller's hype for non-legacy formats, but it's still an amazing card, and I'm pretty sure I was vindicated when you take a look at top 8, and you see this in when you just search for this across all formats, and all it does is show up in CEDH. It is not a legacy card, because Storm is just actively bad, like Spell Combo is just like actively bad. Even with Mind's Desire, it doesn't matter if you're playing Brain Freeze as your kill con or Tendrils. It's just a bad deck. It doesn't have play in, or much play in, Standard or Pioneer just now. This is basically a commander only card. It's worse than Balls' Citadel, so you're just not going to be playing this anywhere, and slowly the price on this card is tanking back down to reality.
Yeah. I think it is much easier now for people to get caught into the hype trap with cards. It's not just with Magic. It's, with Lorcana, with Yu-Gi-Oh, with One Piece, all of them now. It seems like people want the new shiny thing and just look at it in a vacuum, and all of a sudden this is the greatest thing on earth. Which, similarly for me, my overhyped pick was Blossoming Tortoise, which I said, look, the card was like $7 at the time. It's down to $3 or $4 now.
Yeah.
And it was a new toy. in a popular archetype lands. And most lands people, realistically, were just like, yeah, man, this is garbage. But people on the internet still tried to make it a thing. And it's not that good. It's in a collector booster set, which, again, this is a rare in a collector booster set.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. It's going to lose price. That's just part of how it works. It doesn't have the staying power for lands. It's not fast enough for the deck. Not to mention, it's kind of mana inefficient for what the deck wants to be doing. And it just doesn't really see the EDH demand that you would need to have in order for it to have an actual price point.
Correct.
And I think that's another big part of it is lands is like just not super popular in EDH. Obviously in Legacy it's great.
Yeah. But
it's really not too great in EDH right now, and that's kind of where it's at. And until that happens, this card's going to be too much money. I'm sorry, it just is.
Yeah, I honestly thought I was going to be able to toast you on this one because this has been on CK's hot list for or not hot list, sorry, their buy list for a very long time, and they were buying a lot of copies of it. But once they hit some threshold, they just popped off. So I was like, oh man, I can't wait to see what the hell is going on with this card because I was not paying attention to it at all.
Yeah,
I agree. I don't think it's that good. The goofy standard combo with the enchantment that you could put on the creature land that gives the activated ability to the creature land to pump it infinitely was just too weird, too fragile to actually do anything. So yeah, let this card cool down. There's no reason for it to be like $20 or whatever at release. This should end up probably just being not quite a bulk mythic because over time something silly will happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the awaken keyword does exist that turns lands into creatures, and so this does have the opportunity to create some really weird synergies in Commander, and who knows what the future holds for this card. So if it falls to bulk, so be it. I did not think this deserved the hype that it was getting for that fragile little interaction or anything that people might have purported it did in older formats. And then for me, my just right card was Beanstalk. And I actually think that based on where we are now with Beanstalk, it was underhyped.
Yeah,
it is currently taking over every format that isn't Vintage. And the end. I'm pretty sure I talked about that up top when we did the episode initially. And there wasn't a whole lot to say. Reading the card explains why it's amazing. And in concert with Leyline Binding, which is in every format alongside this card right now, there's just nothing you can't do or want to do with this card. And the more you can surround it with free or cheap or free or reduced mana interaction, delve spells, free cast spells like the force cycles or the pitch elementals, the more powerful this card gets. So the wider the card pool gets, the better it becomes overall. Yeah. And this is why I joked minutes ago that I did not have to do a whole lot of work for this episode because I snapped it off. Woe was a very easy set to read.
Yeah.
Unless you're trying to read the card Agatha's Soul Cauldron, then you might as well read Storm Cauldron.
Yeah, that card I stand by what I said. It's too much money. The price stayed the same. Still too much money.
Yeah.
Just sorry.
So
it is.
Beans, man. We just out here thinking about them beans.
It clearly works. It's pretty good.
Yeah. I have to play Hull Breacher in Legacy now because it's very difficult to beat beans when you're not playing beans.
Yeah.
That's where we are.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It is. I won't say it's format warping. I don't think it's that bad. But it is certainly already format defining in multiple formats.
Yep.
So my just right was Agatha. Yep. Not Soul Cauldron, Agatha. So this was sitting at, a little bit under $1, and it still is. The thing that I like about this card is it does Gruul things, and it does them well. It's obviously the reason I think that it was just right is the same reason that I cited for Tortoises being over. And that is that we're in a collector booster era. So it's a rare, mythic, whatever.
Yep.
It's not going to be worth a lot of money. There are so few. There's maybe one every set, which in this one, I guess, with Agatha's Soul Cauldron, whatever. But this card's $1. I think it's still right at around $1.
Yeah.
I think that this is one that's going to sit there for a while, and it may eventually start to like slowly tick up here and there, and I think that's fine. It's just going to happen. But this to me is a pedigree card.
Okay.
By which I mean this is the pedigree of card that will forever occupy what a modern bulk is, a bulk mythic. It does things, it does them fairly well, but it's not incredibly broken. And, when mythics were first introduced, a lot of people said, oh, this is just a way to artificially inflate set size. And the scarcity naturally buoyed the price on some of that. Well, we don't have that anymore because, well,
Infinite product is opening.
Yeah. Infinite product, yeah. When I can open a collector booster and instead of maybe 3 or 4 times a box getting a mythic, I can get 6 in one pack. I don't really know that matters. It's not there. It's Sheoldreds. It's Soul Cauldrons. Yada yada yada. It's just not good. But there we are. That's my just right. That's the Goldilocks treatment for the set.
Yeah, I think it's actually important to remember that when we do these, it's not about picking cards that are expensive for this. It's just these are the cards that are going to have lasting hype, or for the just right section, lasting hype at this level. It doesn't matter what the price point is for them. People are just going to be happy for them.
Oh yeah.
Whenever they can utilize them, buy them, trade for them, etc. It's just going to keep people interested in the set. And I think a good example of this, if you want to go back even further into an era when, it's still the modern era, but when we weren't seeing a lot of packs opened, is Restoration Angel. I don't think that card had a ton of hype on it comparatively to the other cards in the set, but people were very happy to own that card, to play that card, to trade for that card, and enjoyed that card and what it did. It was just kind of a workhorse for that set. It made people want to engage with that set. Agatha might not want to make people engage with the set overall, but because there are a lot of other really fun and interesting cards in the set, I think it might get a little overshadowed in that regard. But I think it checks all the other boxes for a card that is, or was, just right then and is still now in terms of hype. So it's yet again an interesting kind of way to look at cards in the set, not just from a financial standpoint, right? We got to keep that in mind. It's not. That's not what all these sets are about. So overall, Agatha does Gruul things and does it at an enjoyable rate, and for the reasons you cited, well hyped. Yeah. All right, let's move on to picks.
Yes.
But I know you should go first this episode, but we're gonna build up into your pick off of the back of mine.
Yes, love that when it comes together.
Yeah. My pick this week is Apex Allosaur. So this is yet another enraged dinosaur, but I held off on the pick because it seems non-unique enough that it could have gotten a reprint, and it did, so now is the time. Apex Allosaur, for those that don't know, because it was only printed in Commander 2019 prior to the Ixalan Commander reprint, is a 10/10 for 7 and 2 green. When it ETBs, it fights up to one target creature you don't control, and then it has the enrage keyword. Whenever it is dealt damage, it fights up to one target creature you don't control. So it just comes in and punches everything until it dies, basically. That's just the way it rolls.
Yeah.
This thing comes in hot and swinging.
Pretty great, honestly.
It is. And we talked about Silverclad Ferocidons a couple of weeks ago, and how that enrage trigger was a very specific type of control. That doesn't have to be inside the dinosaur deck. And Apex Allosaur is a very similar type of control, but it doesn't ask players to sacrifice permanents. It just starts dealing. It just throws hands. So, exactly. When I put this on my list on June 23rd, CK was buying 30 at $3.70 in TCG Market. was $9.47, and there were 160 listings. At the beginning of August, CK was buying 3 for $11. Sorry, they were selling 3 for $11, but they were not buying any. But they had moved their buy price up to $6.40, so they were basically kind of getting ready to stage buy lists for Lost Caverns based on what was there. Now today, CK is buying 22 at $4.25, which is over what my notes had, which was 22 at $4. And on TCG Player, there are 116 listings today with a market price of $8.85. When I was taking my notes, there were 114 listings for this version of the card with a market of $9.29. So the market is moving down as we expected it to. And that's why we're kind of here talking about this card right now.
Yeah.
So when we look at this card, how does it play inside Commander? And it plays just like it reads. First, you're probably going to look at this inside a dinosaur deck. And after that, I think it's just Big Chungus deck.
Yeah.
You know, a 10-10.
Big Chungus.
Big Chungus. 10-10 for 9 with no keywords aside from Enrage. It doesn't trample. Sorry, no evasion. It just comes in with hands. Like,
yep.
That's Chungus. Because that's what happens when you get above rate power and toughness. You usually lack those evasive keywords or those like good combat keywords. So you've got to do it via ancillary means. So I mentioned earlier like Brawn and Nylea, stuff like that. Or what's the Fervor? Give all your creatures taste, right? So when we take a broad look at this card in the format, a lot of what I said about Silverclad Ferocidons still applies. Apex Allosaur is definitely a big Chungus, so you have to play it in a deck that wants to lean into that strategy. But because the Enrage trigger is very like generic, quote unquote, you can use it to clean up the board in a similar but worse fashion compared to Ferocidons. Because again, Ferocidons asks you to sack permanents. Allosaur just comes in like slobber knocking creatures. Now, like Ferocidons and Polyraptor, nothing about Allosaur locks you into the Dinosaurs theme, which I believe is the upside here. All you have to do is play it in a deck that can put it on the battlefield by any means necessary. Though with some of the Rex cards, specifically Savage Order, we might see an uptick in popularity of this card in the Dinosaur archetype. Right now, it's not as popular as some of the other Enrage control-based Enrage triggers. And I want to believe that was mainly because of the price point, not because of the mana value. So that's what I mean when I say this. When you compare it to other similar dinosaurs, it just seems low in population, and I'm hoping that eventually moves up. Now, this is... Oh, and for the... By the by, Savage Order is the card Natural Order. Exactly, to a T. Except instead of searching for a green creature, you get a dinosaur.
Yep.
2 double green, sacrifice, I believe, a creature, go get a dinosaur. That's all sorcery. Savage Order, Natural Order, very much the same card. Now, this is a card, casually, through and through. It's not offensive in terms of what it does and provides. If you can constantly trigger the Enrage keyword, again, like Ferocidons, you'll see major success playing this card, and I think it checks most or all of the boxes the casual Commander player has when looking at like big dumb beaters for their over-the-top ramp decks. And like I said, I know this comes in swinging and probably dies after it comes in because it ETBs, it fights, it takes damage, that triggers the Enrage, so it fights again, and it's going to go until its toughness disappears. There are ways you can make this indestructible at instant speed and just clear the board with Apex Allosaur. So I'm just kind of like sidestepping all of those hoops you have to jump through to do that, but there aren't many, and they're not that small. They're pretty wide hoops. Yeah. So you can and should see this alongside cards like Ferocidon to clean up the board. From a timeline standpoint, right now we want to buy into the dip. That's why I'm really excited to see CK's buy list moving up while TCG market is moving down. With the influx of singles from new product and the holidays upcoming, we might see stagnation all the way until about February 2024 when the next standard set drops. Now again, this is in the Commander product, which was delayed by about a week or two. So the real like glut to market either happens the week we're recording or the week after. I won't really know until it kind of shows up on TCG Player after people buy and crack. I know I was able to buy a Dino deck last weekend, but I don't know what the populace at large is able to do. So Altasaur was always a slow gainer with a huge spike resetting the floor at March of the Machine and March of the Machine Aftermath, as we got a few new dinosaurs in both of those sets to play with, and that was basically an unsustainable spike, so the floor cratered, and it's basically risen back up to where it was, but not as quickly. So it does look like the market can probably sustain this card close to 15 in the long run, but now that we actually have population coming back in, we're going to see a tank, and we just want to be right here, right now, buying this at basically 50% to hold on to move out when this hits like 15 again. I will say, though, velocity in this card has been slow as of late, but I believe that has more to do with the price prior to the reprint than anything else regarding this card. Like, people might have seen this card sitting at like $15 to $18 and thought that's too much for a dinosaur that just comes in and starts swinging. Like, we are making Heavy Punch deck, but we don't need Heavy Punch All-Star. We can figure this out another way. But once this becomes more approachable and hits more content creation channels because of the dinosaur deck, we will see an uptick in people wanting to buy this card overall, which is a lot of what we're looking for. If you didn't buy into the 2019 deck, which was the Watley deck, I believe, and
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, like, you just didn't know this card existed. Nobody really played that deck on stream. I don't think anybody in Commander Clash did, if memory serves, and I don't know if anybody over at Game Nights did. I don't think Star City played the Watley deck at all. They just pulled the free spells from it, and Apex Altasaur never fit into anything else. But now that we have another dedicated dinosaur deck that people are already monkeying with, I know Tomer from Goldfish already has his upgrade video out, so he should at least talk about this card in the deck. Whether or not he keeps it, I don't know. And then Star City is doing upgrade series as well to keep up. So they will again talk about this card. So that's going to continue to put pressure on this card. And if people don't buy that deck, they just want to play dinosaurs, they don't know about Altasaur, well, guess what? Now they do, and now they're going to come out looking for the single.
Yeah.
But like I said, I think this is probably a 4 to 5 month look overall into open market. Reprint equity. We got this in the Commander deck for LCI, and I don't think we'll see it again for some time until either we go back to Ixalan or we get another dinosaur-centric set where this could be in the Commander deck. And since we know it's coming up for the next, 4, 5, 6, 12 sets in the next year, none of them involve dinosaurs, so we're pretty safe. We're at least insulated for that amount of time. So I think we're A-okay. And this obviously did not make it into the main set here, so I wouldn't expect it to make it into the main set again. It would just be in Commander product. Cool. By quantity, pretty cut and dry. I'd be happy with about 4 of these once these hit a price point that I'm happy with, which is probably somewhere between $5 and $7. And I'd move them to locals. But if I wanted to move to buy list, I think the sky's the limit once this hits between 5 and 7. And I just scoop. I'm just waiting overall before I make any kind of moves.
Yeah, I think this one's really good. And as I'll touch on in my pick, obviously the tribe is pretty relevant. People love it.
Yep.
Jurassic Park has drawn a lot of people in. Anecdotally, today I got off work late because we had like 16 people show up that were literally invisibles up until this set. So, I mean, there's that going forward as well. And the more of those people that get involved, the more looks cards like this get, the better off they are to have.
Well, they came in to the store not just being invisibles, but they wanted to sit down and learn to play at the store to engage with the set, right?
Yeah, and they're like, oh, we just hang out with our friends. We've never played at a store. It was literally, we're just here to check this out. We want to see what this is like. It took a little bit longer. I didn't put time limits because, it's your first time in a store. I don't want you to have a bad experience, but it got people in. Yeah. And I think that's the nice thing about specifically cards like this. It's a big, dumb tribe, which feels bad to say because it's not like a dumb tribe at all. It's just, this is what casual players want. So it's what draws them in. And as long as you have that, stuff like this is amazing.
It is less offensive dragons.
Yeah, it is. It's less offensive dragons. That's exactly what it is.
Myreme and Karthus and Ramos, all these other dragon generals that you have are so offensive at the table.
They are. But, these dinosaurs, everyone loves them. Doesn't matter. Speaking of generals and dinosaurs and things being less offensive, my pick is Coat of Arms. Similarly, casuals love it. It was just reprinted in collector boosters. So what's going to happen is if you take a look at the stocks graph for literally any printing of this card ever, the same fucking thing that always happens. This card is going to go down, and then guess what? It's just going to go back up. Every single time. It doesn't matter how many times this card is printed, what art it gets, which, by the way, this is unique art, so that is to our benefit. And across the lifetime of the card, like going to Exodus, it's literally only ever gone up permanently. Like it'll teeter, will go down a little bit, always goes back up.
Yep.
Just always goes back up. Card is too good for it to have as affordable a price as it does. Now, granted, it's in the commanders of Caverns of Ixalan. Yes. So this is less a call of buy now and more a call of pay attention for the next couple weeks, because as this product gets opened, this price is going to dip. Now, the nice thing about Caverns of Ixalan is we don't have serialized cards in this set.
Thankfully.
So this set is not going to be opened into the ground like Lord of the Rings was, like Brothers War was, because people aren't chasing serialized for the money. They're just cracking it for the cards they need, which means there is a chance this stuff starts to stagnate. And then you start to see the price go up a little bit faster. Now, in terms of quantity, look, man, it's Coat of Arms. You could have 200 of these things. You're going to sell them.
Yeah.
It's literally just what are you comfortable putting in and what is your comfortable out. Looking at some of the other printings, it's maybe a month or two, sometimes 6 or more, depending on the size of the reprint. This one, I, similarly to a lot of things I've been picking lately, am expecting a tax return time. That's about when you're going to see it March, April. You'll see a little bit more of a return. In the meantime, we have Wilds of Eldraine, Ixalan came out. We have Ravnica Remastered coming out. There are opportunities for other tribal synergies to pick up, which may accelerate the movement of this card. Mm-hmm. But it's something that, again, being a baseline, this goes in every aggro casual EDH deck you can imagine. Like, this is what you run. I don't think there's too deep. I don't think there is a bad timeline, because this card is just liquid gold. Mm-hmm. It will just sell every time you get it.
No,
it's just good.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it ages like a fine wine because they keep making new types.
Yeah,
because the other keyword to use is kindred, and that doesn't make sense here. New kins, and that doesn't work. They just keep making new types or extending old types, which is great. We're going to basically 2-ish horror sets in a row, and like we could get support for some tribes that people, or some types that
vampires, zombies.
I was thinking more along the lines of like literal horrors.
Oh yeah,
because they exist or nightmares. Stuff like the spirit. We have spirits already, but not enough to maybe make a great commander deck.
Yeah.
So once those get fleshed out, more Coat of Arms becomes one of those cards that just kind of fits in if you really just want to beat down with like 4 or 5 things. And it's really good. Like it is a card that is beloved. It's a card that does a lot, and it's a card that is used colloquially to describe a number of other cards in the game. When somebody asks you what Monotype is, sometimes you just get back, it's just white Force Spike. And that's kind of what I mean. Sliver Legion is colloquially known as Coat of Arms Sliver.
Yeah.
Like, what does Legion do? Coat of Arms. That's it. What do the others do?
What it does.
Have to explain the wall of text. Aside from the indestructible one. That one's easy. Right? That one's straight up. Yeah. And it should never not be like that. WotC keeps trying to change Coat of Arms and make it do other things. You've looked at Vanquisher's banner recently. I think we talked about Zendikar Resurgent not too long ago, and we get all these other cool odds and ends that don't quite pay homage to Coat of Arms, but kind of extend the identity of what WotC wants to do with these types around the game. And why not go back and look at some of the original options? It remains one of the best when you want to go wide, especially when you're at a table where its unilateral effect is not really a downside.
Yeah.
Because it is impactful when somebody has like 2 or 3 creatures that share the same type. A couple of wizards can start to gang up pretty quickly if you're not mindful of it. But hey, that's the gambit you got to pass through with Coat of Arms.
Yep.
It's an interesting litmus test, but it's a fantastic casual card, and it allows typal decks to win with minimal resources.
Yep.
Like every now and again we talk about, I think the Angel deck is a good example. We looked at Giada. That is a card that is great at the helm of the deck for the most part, if I remember the card correctly, but not good after a rebuild. Like when you need to rebuild from nothing because you're in mono white, it is very difficult with Giada. But when you have something like Coat of Arms in the deck, it's not nearly that bad. 2, 3, 4 Angels can win the game very quickly.
Pretty quick, yeah.
With the Coat of Arms out. Arabo, the Cats deck. Again, it has green, so you have Sylvan Library and Harmonize and some other options to draw cards. Coat of Arms is a great way to come back from that. Goblins is another tribe that obviously really enjoys a Coat of Arms style effect because you can make a horde of goblins real quick with Krenko, and then that just ends the game that turn. Like, out of nowhere, you just tap your Krenko, make a bunch of little goblins. You're probably playing Fervor, War Chief, Chieftain, etc. That all give your crew haste. Coat of Arms wins the game right there. I think this is a really good look overall, and I think one of the hidden benefits to Coat of Arms is that it doesn't kind of rub up against that little, like, how dare you win in combat with plus X that we talk about every now and again, that Crater Huff gets, that some other cards get, that like unnecessary heat because the game won in combat. Like, Coat of Arms is just really weird. It can be really goofy, and it just seems more acceptable to win in combat that way, so it becomes a more palatable card overall for people. And so, for everything you mentioned and more, I like and will always like Coat of Arms as a casual pick.
Yeah.
So I'm all in on Coat. Like, I didn't even realize this got a reprint until you mentioned it. Honestly, yeah. I've started doing some research, but there's so many different things to look at with LCI. Because the Rex cards are technically inside the spoilers that I just haven't given it my attention yet. So I had no idea this was in the Commander decks.
Yeah.
So, I like it. Anybody who actually sits down and trades with Commander players should probably keep Coat of Arms in their binders at all times. It is a break in case of glass kind of move.
Definitely.
But yeah, love it. Anything else before we cut out?
No.
All right. So for at MtG Cabalcast on Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, and YouTube, I am at Halt. I am Reptar. You are
at Damon _Thurston.
We'll see you next week.